Welcome to March. And March is my birthday month. Actually, my birthday uh is tomorrow. And so yeah, happy birthday me. And when I was first looking at different topics for March, everybody I know that was giving me advice on the pod was telling me that I shouldn't do a topic. I should make March 100% about me and 100% about celebrating my life and the things that I've accomplished and topics from that, or just go live every Friday and tell people where I am and get stuff. And I'm not someone who actually looks to get a lot of things. So I said, bump that. I want to make it about a topic very, very important to me. So I chose minority mental health. So I'm going to talk about grief. This whole month is going to be about grief. And I say that because so many of us, not just minorities, but people in general, lose our shit when we're talking about grief. And there's a bunch of different kinds of grief, and there are ways that people deal with grief. And so I want to kind of talk about that and give my opinions on some things, and probably as I get deeper in the month, get some statistics as well. So, as someone who has pretty much lost 90% of my core family, so all my grandparents are gone, my parents are gone, I've lost one of my two siblings, and it 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 is very settling. I think is the word I'm going to use, settling, to look back at your life and have the what ifs and the wins. And but the one thing I can say is I know about grief. And I also know that grief comes in many different forms. And today I want to talk about what people typically think of when they say grief. And it's this myopic version where you're crying and you have like the snotty running nose and mucus is pouring down your face with the tear streamed face. And, it's sadness. And that sadness from the first moments of death tend to stick with you. And as time passes, it's the idea that your grief lightens. And as you move forward in grief, things they kind of get easier, is what people say. It's like, oh, baby, it'll get easier with time. And I don't think that is actually necessarily true. We don't experience life the same as each other. We don't experience love the same as each other. And therefore, we would not experience grief like everyone else, because we are not like everyone else. And there is grief so profound and impactful that your life is literally changed and is irreversible. And it doesn't mean that the person does not move on with their life. It's just that this new version of grief, this new version of your life, is truly a new life. You are changed and you are not the same person. And I want to say, for me, I think that the typical version of grief that people think of when they hear about grief and is usually the grief of a younger person. And I don't want to dismiss if you're one of those people who that is what grief looks like for you, and you're not a young person. I think that is fine and that is okay. But I think that for me, when I look back on all the loss that I had, it was my young person's version of grief. And I think that it's because I didn't have a lot of the cognitive processes to deal with my emotions that accompanied the deaths that I had. And I will preface this with saying that yes, I do have a degree in biopsychology, and that's mostly dealing with the biological etiology of psychosis. And so that it is different, but I had to take a lot of psych classes. And, one of the things that came up and I've been processing as I keep losing people in my life is what grief looks like for me. And actually, shout out one of my god sisters. She actually has a grief journal, and she does a lot of talking about grief as well. And, being in our family, her dad was my dad's best friend. And so I watched my father process losing his best friend. and me losing my godfather. And again, I was young. I was absolutely young when that happened. And I feel for my god sister because she was an infant. So she grew up not even remembering his voice. And to think about that and look back on that as an adult, um, it was very eye opening because I lost my father as an adult and I have a lot of great memories with him. And to lose the idea of losing a parent when you were an infant and to not actually remember that parent's voice, that is something that I could never imagine. And to sit and watch her very publicly speak about her grief and to put together a grief journal and all the amazing things that she's been able to channel her grief into, it is quite impressive. And so when I talk about like the stereotypical version of grief, and for me, it being something I experienced as a younger person when I had less development and less knowledge about the psychology of grief, that was more for me like my grandparents and, you know, my aunts and uncles. And I think when we start talking about my grandparents, I was probably out of my four grandparents most close with my maternal grandmother. And I spent a lot of time with all of my grandparents. I am very lucky in that regard. Um, but my maternal grandmother, she taught me how to can. I used to bake a lot with her. And I watched her die. I watched her suffering. I didn't actually watch her death, but I watched her suffering. And she had a debilitating neuromuscular disorder that was very painful. And she was very aware of her death because it was one of those disorders where you slowly watch yourself lose the ability to use your muscles. And so her death was very tragic. And then I had my paternal grandfather, um, being very close to him and watching how he passed and being older. I was older when he passed. My maternal grandmother, um I was a senior in high school, so I was older, but I was still dealing with some of the grief and the idea of what death looked like for me. And same thing with my paternal grandfather. And I remember all the circumstances around both their losses. And with my paternal grandfather, I just remember, the summers at their house, and just like all the things I got to do with him and the things that he taught me. And like he was a handy person and I picked up so many of the things that I do now from him. And one of the funniest things I remember with him, when it comes to handy person type stuff, is he was doing a construction on a structure at their house, and he was allowing us to help. And I was one of the few people that actually wanted to help. He goes, you know what the most important thing about, demolition? And I go, no, what's the most important thing? He goes, when you hear something rumble, be quick like a bunny. And I go, okay. So and he made something rumble just to see if I was going to be quick like a bunny. Man, I flew out of that structure faster than you can say quick like a bunny. And he started cracking up laughing. He goes, well, you learned the lesson. And nothing actually rumbled, but it was so funny to me because I learned so much from him. And that was one of the funniest stories I remember. And one of the things for me with grief is being able to still love the people and to still have that those stories, and whether they were good or bad stories, being able to still talk about the grief, I think was very, very important to me. So to kind of talk about, my grief, I have to be fair and set some of the background. I was in high school or young. I was young in college, freshman, sophomore. for a lot of the major losses in my life. And college for me was escape. It was my it was the first time for me as a person. I felt like I was being seen as an individual. My grandmother, like I said, she passed away my senior year in high school, and it was right before graduation. I remember writing about her disorder and getting a scholarship um, for that speech that I gave, and she she didn't see me graduate. Um, she was actually the reason why when I went to college, I wanted to do neurology and neuroscience. Um, and watching, when you watch someone decline, cognition becomes very important to you, which is one of the reasons for me, I felt so betrayed by my brain when I started having seizures. And I think that I may have said it before, and if I didn't, I will say it now. My brain is my best friend. I have a lot of friends, and my friends are very important to me. But you come to me and you ask me, who is your best friend, Angelique? My answer will always be my brain. Like my brain was the first friend I had. I love my brain. And it's so funny because even before I started having seizures, whenever there was a need to volunteer for like a PET study or an MRI study, and even when I started having, a bunch of MRIs and different kinds of scans, my requirement, as they were sticking me through every machine they could think of and poking and prodding me like I was a goddamn pin cushion. Um, my only requirement to do test number 15 million was, do I get a picture of my brain? And the answer was no. My neurologist knew that I had to get a picture of my brain or that I wasn't doing it. And I remember one study he wanted to do, and it required me to be very uncomfortable for a very long time. And I said, well, do I get a picture of my brain? And he knew that with this test, this study, I would not get a picture of my brain. And he goes, this is very important for, your prognosis and for us to figure out like what's actually going on. And I told him no. And he convinced me to do it by requiring them to give me a picture of my brain. I had an extra test while I was doing that study just so I could get a picture of my brain. And I actually have some really good functional pictures of my brain where they were going through different stuff. And they were showing me how my brain reacted on all the different planes as I was speaking, for example. And that was the only way they were going to get some of those images, because I liked my brain and I wanted to see how my brain changed due to the seizures and if there was any permanent damage. And they were looking for that too. But I have a whole Google photo album called My Brain, and it's pictures of my brain throughout the years. And I have a few friends of mine, some that are doctors and some that are not. And my husband also comments how I am so weird because I keep pictures of my brain. And I look at them, like how people go through their memories and look at, their kids' first walk. I will scroll through my Google album with pictures of my brain and be like, oh, that was such a great functional MRI. I remember what I was thinking about when that slice was taken. And it's important, but I digress. I really pushed myself into the field of medicine because of watching what my grandparents went through with my grandmothers and my grandfathers. And my grandfather actually had to have his leg amputated, and watching some of that stuff and watching, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather with his dementia and his cancer, and my paternal grandmother and, her trying to write her own history of her family and what was going on with her near the end for her. Like they were very inspirational. And that's why I think that grief for me was so different, and I started to approach grief in a very different way, and each passing of someone kind of compounded, making me shelter, making me want to go into myself even further and not to truly, really express my grief in a meaningful way. Like there was always the snot and the tears, but as I aged, there was more anger. And I think that with grief, people really don't talk about the anger that comes with grief. And as I started to lose my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, and my losses started to come in waves, and with those waves of snot and tears became more and more anger, and like waves crashing into the shore. And as and with that, you get the erosion and buildings get torn down. My anger started to really tear at me. And I think that people need to recognize the level of anger that comes with grief. And some people frame it as being angry at their deity. Some people just frame it as, life is fucked up. This is a necessary part of a fucked up life, and I just have to deal with it. Um, I think that the anger is productive. And so few people talk about how productive anger can be. We always view anger as a negative emotion, but anger is a very productive emotion. And the neurotransmitters that actually produce anger are very quintessential. They are primitive, um, but they're also used in a way of protection for the human brain. And I think that when we think about grief, we always think about the sadness that comes along with grief. But, people feel joy with grief. Not necessarily that they're happy the person died, though that does happen. It absolutely does happen. I would be lying if I didn't say that there were some graves I would absolutely tap dance on. Um, but you have that joy, and sometimes that joy is the fact that that person is no longer suffering, and that is a very valid emotion to have. Like, yeah, I'm sad, but I know they're not suffering anymore. I'm sad, but I can take solace and get laughter from the stories that I was blessed to have. I'm sad, but I still have their warmth inside of me. And I one of the first things that I remember from my sister's passing, she was only a year older than me. So we were very close growing up. And one of the most profound things that I remember from her passing is being told that you can still love them. And you don't have to talk and treat them like they're no longer in your life, that they're a past tense, that they're gone. Yes, their physical person is no longer here, but you can talk to them. You still have that ability to feel their love. And that was something that has always brought me peace and joy. Do I miss the most important people in my life that are gone? Absolutely. Is it sad? Absolutely. Do I have joy? Absolutely. Do I have anger? Fuck yes. I, yes. Yes, I do. Um, but that joy and that sadness and that anger, they work in tandem. They work in tandem. And it has provided me with a new insight into my own grief and, trying to take everything, all my emotions, and stuff them inside of myself into a box became very detrimental to me. And I had to start unpacking my grief over the years. So after I lost all my grandparents and I really went into myself, and that was detrimental to me. And at that point, by the time all my grandparents had passed, um, I was losing aunts and uncles, and lost a sibling, lost more aunts and uncles and cousins. Uh, then I lost a parent, and when I lost my parent, you lose such a structure around you because people kind of feel like they can only approach you and deal with you in a few different ways. And they were probably right. Like I said, I had a lot of anger, but I have so much of my parents in me. I look like him. I have so much of his personality. And so I lost a huge support system because people saw me and they saw him. And it hurt them so much that they could not be around me because all it did was hurt them because they saw him. There were a few people that actually came to me and was like, look, I know that this is a huge abandon for you, and I apologize, but I need time. There were a few people who, after the fact, was like, yeah, I couldn't be around you because of that. And it just made me angrier because where I should have been receiving support, I didn't. It was invites out that went unanswered. It was me asking people to come by and spend some time with me that just flat nose. And I didn't know why until well after the fact. And so I dealt with this huge abandonment, which led to a lot of anger. And as I aged and matured, the idea of, the snot and the tears evolved into something so much more. And that's why I think we have to change our idea of what grief is and allow other emotions too, because with the sadness, you get the stories. And one of the things that's still funny to me to this day, my father, one of his favorite exclamations was "shit," not shit, shit with the D on the end. After you get the T in, you get the D. And so it was usually something he would say when he was jovial, and it was like he'd laugh. He'd go shit, and he'd start laughing. And it's funny because when I get around certain family members, and we're talking about something, and one of us would just say it, and we would just all crack up with the memories and start talking about all the different stories and all the different things. And it's amazing to me that something as simple as a swear word can bring back these floods of memories and happy memories. And though it's been years, and yes, I'm still sad, and I'm still angry. I spend more time in the happy place. I do. And more recently, losing my mother, it brought off a whole new wave of emotions. And I know I'm gonna kind of focus on some of that later on in this month. But I decided that the day before my birthday, and with talking about grief and opening Minority Mental Health Month, and kind of diving into this focus on grief, that I wanted to say and really drive home a couple of points. Point number one, I still love all my lost loved ones, and I still have conversations with them. I still make jokes, just our personal um inner jokes. Something will come up and it reminds me of that joke, and I will just be like, yeah, you remember that, and have that laugh, and in my soul, I feel them laughing too, and I have less anger now, I think. Um, if you know me personally, let me know if I got more anger or less anger or the same amount of anger. I think I have less, but whatever. I still, I feel like one of the ways in which I channel my grief, that is much healthier, is I'm a speaking post for others who are going through grief, have gone through grief, and don't have the I don't know how I want to say this. Like they feel like now that they're gone from their lives. And I think that, having that feeling that they may not physically be here, but they're still here helps me so much. And I tell people that all the time. And actually, the person who told me that, my priest, he's gone now too. So I've actually lost two priests in my life. Probably the two priests that I was closest to. I've lost them both, and those were very striking and very hard for me. And so I definitely still have anger about the most recent death. And I'm trying. I am trying. And sometimes it takes longer. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that there are some deaths that I will never get over, because I'm not. There are some people that I lost in the circumstances around their loss and just how things transpired. I will never get over those. There's you know, the Maya Angelou phrase that once people show you who they are, believe them. That is like the mantra that plays in my head now. And some of it came from a loss, and it really got drilled home for me. And some people are like, "Oh, you're just holding a grudge." No, I'm still angry. Grudge holding is once you forgive and you move on, and you just choose to take that anger and hold it over them. No, I'm still in my very active anger period, and there are some people who I will tap dance on their grave. I absolutely will, and I'm fine with that, and I hope that they're fine with that. But even if they weren't, they're dead, so fuck it. Um, and I think that that is also a part of my healing process, because when people hurt, whether it was deliberate or not, when they did actions that hurt, and you say, "Hey, I'm hurt, and this is why I'm hurt," and it could be grief. And I want to make it very clear that you can have grief from losing a relationship. And I'm actually going to talk about this as well later. Um, and that relationship isn't necessarily because someone is dead. So you can experience grief without a dead person. So when you tell someone, "I am hurt because of X," and their response is, "Oh, well," then you get anger. And so I don't want to step on some of the things I'm going to talk about in later weeks, but I will say this. While we explore the different kinds of grief and how grief affects us, I want you to be open to the idea that it is okay to have joy with grief. It is okay to have sadness in your grief. It is okay to be angry in your grief. And honestly, it is okay to just be indifferent, be despondent. Um, there's a whole range of emotions that are okay with your grief. Just like your body acts different physically with your grief, some people's body completely shuts down. Um, some people's bodies get extremely sick. I know that with one of the deaths of my grandparents, I could not leave my bathroom. I was literally spewing from both ends. Like that did happen with one of my grandparents because I got food poisoning at the repast, but with one of the other ones, it was not food poisoning. It was absolutely my body having such an intense physical reaction to the loss. So allow yourself to go through that range of emotions and to have grief that expresses itself in a lot of different ways. So we're going to work through this, walk through this. And though I am going to talk about and focus on only 4 different manifestations of grief, please know and understand that I know that those are not the only ways that grief manifests itself. And it's okay. Be honest with yourself. Talk to yourself. If you're not able to be honest with yourself, you're not going to be honest with anyone else. So thank you for walking this with me. Love to hear your comments on grief. Like, subscribe, share. I would love to have more eyes and more comments on what grief looks like for you. Thank you. Bye.